Okay, weird night for drive home reviews. A lot of firsts. This is the first time I ever got tipped at a movie. I'm coming out. I'm opening the door for this older couple coming out, and I put the little thing down. And the older guy tips me, and then gets mad because I told him I didn't work there. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway, so welcome to a very, very impromptu episode of Drive Home Reviews, because I had no intention of going to the movies tonight. It's at the time I'm recording this, it's Tuesday. I get up at 5 a.m. to go to work, so, late nights at the movies on work nights is not a thing I do a lot, except for maybe some of the retro reviews. But I'm at home, and I'm just kind of messing around. I'm scrolling through the Malco app, because I do that, and I pull up the Ridgeway Cinema, and there's this movie. Never heard of it, and that always catches my eye, because on the Malco app, it has a coming attractions or coming soon thing, so you can kind of see what's coming out. So when a movie just kind of pops up, no notice, no forewarning, you kind of take notice of it. So I was like, all right, check the trailer. Trailer looks interesting. So I'm like, I went back and forth on it for a couple minutes, but what kind of sealed it for me was this idea that, if a movie pops up, just out of nowhere, odds are it's not going to stay around long. Either they didn't know it was coming, or what. But usually when that happens, it's going to be there for maybe a week, maybe two if you're lucky, and then gone. So if you don't see it, if you don't strike while the iron's hot, you're gonna miss it. And people say I should be more spontaneous. So this is me being spontaneous. Shocking, right? However, the whole time I'm driving down here, I'm just thinking, if I'm doing this, if I'm gonna do this, you hope and you pray and you wish that, you hope the movie is at least good to make, everything you're going to go through the next day worth it, when that alarm goes off. And I'm very happy to say that this one is good. This is a surprisingly beautiful little movie. And on the trailer, I guess, is, I thought it said it was directed by Ridley Scott, but in fact it was only produced by him and directed by some other person whose name escapes me right now. Sorry, I've been up all day. Give me a break. Which is odd, because this movie looks like a Ridley Scott movie. Ridley Scott is definitely one of the greatest visual storytellers out there. And I say that even though there's only one of his movies I actually like, and that's The Martian. But you cannot deny that when it comes to framing a shot, framing a moment, his movies look like moving pieces of art. They really do. And this film, I don't know if this guy is a protege of his or what, but the director of this film has that same touch. This film is just gorgeous to look at. The cinematography, the framing, it is just absolutely stunning. Every frame of it. I'm getting ahead of myself. So in case you haven't heard of this movie, which you probably haven't, so Keira Knightley plays the wife of a British Army officer, played by that guy from Everest and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, whose name I can never remember. And he is, so Dawn of the Planet of the Apes there is the new kind of governor, overseer for Hamburg, Germany, just after the war ended. It's like 6 months after the Allies won the war, and he's there kind of trying to, sort shit out. and they end up living in this house that was owned by this German guy played by, is it Alexander Skarsgård? I can't remember. Eric the Vampire from True Blood. So, Keira Knightley and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes have marital issues for various reasons. Eric the Vampire has, lost his wife in the bombings, and it's this whole thing. And of course, Keira Knightley and Eric the Vampire begin a torrid love affair. I'm not doing it justice with the description, especially since I'm not using anybody's names. Basically, here's what you need to know. What this movie is about is it is the story of 3 people, 4 if you count Eric the Vampire's daughter, Frida. That's actually her character's name. 4 people who have been through pure and utter hell and have seen things and experienced things and have done things that no human being is ever mentally prepared to do. And the title, The Aftermath, is incredibly accurate because it is these people really trying to put some semblance of their life back together, or trying to figure out where do they go from here after everything. And it's a beautifully messy movie. Messy in that the emotions that the characters are portraying, the things they're going through, the choices they make are not necessarily good choices or the best choices, but it's the only ones they seem to be able to make under the circumstances. You understand why the characters are making the choices that they're making. There are no bad guys here. Well, I mean, in the story there are some bad guys, but within the core, I guess what you would call the love triangle, which, boy, is that a cliche you get tired of. But in this core group, there are no villains. Nobody is right and nobody is wrong. They are all equally wrong and all equally right and all equally just trying to find some kind of balance. And that's a difficult thing to pull off. It's weird because this movie is kind of has a lot of things in it that I hate in other movies, and yet in this one it works. For example, I've railed on it a couple times on these about movies where, especially lower budget indie films, where there's not a lot of dialogue and they just kind of jump from scene to scene. And there's not a lot of dialogue in the early goings of this movie. A lot of the early goings of this movie is very silent, and you're left just with the characters and their reactions to things. So why do I like it here as opposed to in those indie movies? 2 reasons. First of all, scenes are allowed to play out. You're not jumping seemingly at random from one random second to another. You're allowed to the camera stays with the characters throughout an instance, lets them run the full gamut of their emotions, and then moves on. And even though there are a couple really quick 2-second scenes in here, there's a couple of them, one of them with Keira Knightley kind of looking in the mirror after Eric the Vampire has kissed her for the first time, and it's like a very short scene, barely 10 seconds, and all I could think sitting there was, man, how long it took them to get in wardrobe, makeup, set up the shot, light it, all this for that little sliver of cinema, but why that doesn't bug me here is because the emotion that she is clearly playing is a logical continuation to the emotion she was playing in the scene before. A lot of these other ones, it's just scene, like someone took a jigsaw puzzle and is just cramming pieces together. that leads to the other thing I hate about those other movies, is that a lot of times when they do these films with not a lot of dialogue, the character is just there staring blankly, and that's supposed to be deep. A lot's going on inside, behind his eyes, you know, and they're just like, you know, robots or some shit. But here, that's not the case. Even though there's not a lot of dialogue going on in the early goings of this movie, the actors are acting, and they are acting their guts out without saying hardly anything. And I think that's something we really do have to get into here, and that is the acting in this is really, it is beautifully subtle. There is so much done with a look and a gesture, and the few lines they do speak there in the early goings, because eventually there is more dialogue as the film goes on. And now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably deliberate, probably more of a metaphor, because Keira Knightley and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes are a little bit estranged. She is mistrustful of Eric the Vampire. He is mistrustful of her. So I think that the no speaking part in the early part of this movie is meant to be kind of a subtle, or not so subtle, I guess, metaphor for the distance between the characters. And then as, you know, the distances are kind of covered up, or as they're, you know, bridged through one way or the other, there's more dialogue. I just realized that. I'm kind of proud of myself for realizing that. That's called film analysis, kids. But anyway, our three lead actors do just an amazing job. I feel Keira Knightley has really found her niche in these much smaller, artsy films, because she's a name actor. She's got a name. People know her, but she's not what you would call a huge box office draw. You know? And that's nothing against her. But it definitely feels like she fits better into these smaller films. And she really fits well into these World War II films. I remember she was in this one. She was in one with Benedict Cumberbatch. I think it's The Imagination Game is what it's called. And she just fits into this time period so well. You know, just something about her look, her mannerisms, her posture. She just fits in that time period like a glove. Alexander Skarsgård, whatever Skarsgård he is, also does a really good job, especially since he's asked to, you know, speak German. I don't know if that's like a natural second language for him, but it's bizarre that he's a German who's speaking English, but when he speaks English, he doesn't have a German accent. That's kind of funny. Like, he speaks a perfectly American accent, but then he seems like he has a very natural accent when he's speaking German. That's one of the only things about this movie that bugged me. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes also does a great job, and he's one of those characters, he's one of those thankless characters, one of those ones that, you know, he's what I would call the Bill Pullman. You know, he's the Bill Pullman of this movie, the guy who is not the sexy, quiet stranger, you know, who teaches Mademoiselle how to love again kind of character. He's that more thankless role, and boy, does he put a lot into it. Like, you really feel for this guy. Again, he's not a villain. You know, and I think, again, that's something, I said it a few minutes ago, but it bears repeating. Everything is so neat about this movie in that it's so balanced, and you really feel the animosity and the mistrust between all parties. You know, they're driving through bombed out Germany, you know, where all these innocent people were killed, and you're looking at them and going, man, these poor people. Then you remember, oh wait, you know, from the Brit point of view, it's like they spent the last couple years bombing the shit out of London. Didn't seem to matter to them. So it's this whole thing of it really paints that picture of everybody was fucking wrong, you know, because war is just fucking wrong. And the aftermath of it is ugly, and, you know, because we always get this feeling, we always get this image of World War II, that when it was over, everyone went, yay, and then, everybody went home and things kind of continued on. And when you think about what had to be done to kind of get to that point, it's staggering. And yeah, you never think about it, but yeah, of course the Germans would be pissed off, A, that they lost, and B, that now British and American troops were occupying their country and taking their homes. I mean, yeah, of course they'd be pissed. Why wouldn't they be? And again, this movie never says this person's right, this person's wrong. And that just brings me back to my other point about it, as this is probably the best directed movie I've seen all year. This film is stunning to look at. It's a rare directorial eye that can make bombed out ruins seem hauntingly beautiful, if that makes any sense. And the director just nails every shot. It is, stunning. Even there's a sex scene, a love scene in this, and it's shot and photographed almost like earlier in the film, let's back up a second. Eric the Vampire, when he's giving them a tour of the house, they notice that there is a place on the wall where a picture has obviously been taken down. Okay? And you're left kind of going, okay, that's weird. And then later on, Keira Knightley is commenting, she's at her friend's house, and she says, oh, you have a painting missing too. And her friend says, yeah, all the houses do. That's where they hung the picture of Hitler. All right. So anyway, Eric the Vampire hangs a nude painting, apparently by some artist. Obviously by some artist. What a fucking stupid sentence. This is the thing when you're doing these live. It's a painting obviously by some artist. What I meant was obviously by some famous artist whose name I didn't quite catch. So it's a very tasteful nude. And I go back and I go through all of that because the lovemaking scene in this is photographed and shot almost like that painting. It's not gratuitous. It's not overly long. It's not disgusting like some other ones that I've seen. It's quite beautiful, really. So yeah, there's just a lot that goes on in this. So is this movie perfect? No. As I said, the accent thing was kind of weird for me. And while in our core group of characters there are no bad guys, of course there's, the overzealous British intelligence agent who is just a pure and unbridled asshole to Eric the Vampire. Just a dickweed, like with no redeeming features. So like you couldn't resist that cliche. There's also a side story with Eric the Vampire's daughter, who gets mixed up with, I'm not even sure what you'd call them, freedom fighters, terrorists, whatever, but this group of Hitler loyalists. She starts seeing this boy who's a member of it, and he's kind of pumping her for information. It's very unclear whether she knows that's what he's doing or if she's just, being taken in. And this is all building, and you're like, okay, clearly what's going to happen, and I'm sitting there, going through it in my head. So clearly what's going to happen is that this kid, this Hitler loyalist, is either A, going to kill Keira Knightley's husband, or B, is going to, therefore eliminating the complication of her getting together with Eric the Vampire in the end, or B, is going to try to kill Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and accidentally kill Keira Knightley instead, thereby, both guys are without her, that kind of thing. But I'm thinking it's going to end one of these two ways, and it doesn't do that. There's a scene with it, but it's very, I don't know, it's almost like that whole subplot could have been eliminated. It has no real payoff. And the payoff it has, I understand why I don't want to spoil things, why they kind of did it the way they did it, but they hadn't established enough of it to make it worth it. And yeah, it's just that whole subplot went nowhere, really. Nowhere at all. And the only reason I liked it is because the daughter character was also an interesting character in the films, and watching her kind of go through the whole thing from a young woman's point of view, a teenager's point of view. But that whole subplot, it was really ridiculous. Didn't go anywhere. But on the whole, this movie is a shocking discovery and a welcome one, a lovely film with an ending that this movie almost lost me at the end. And again, I don't want to give it away, but it almost made me lose sympathy. And then at the last minute, it saved itself. So I was like, yay! When the thing I didn't want to have happen happened. So the movie came back, and I was very happy about that. So final grade for The Aftermath. I'm gonna go an A- on this one. And the only reason I don't go, higher A is, one, again, the subplot drags it down a bit. And two, while I appreciate the cinematic styling, I would have liked a little bit more dialogue. Just a little. I think you could have gotten into these characters a little bit more with some really well-written dialogue. It would have helped some of the relationships feel a little bit more genuine, just a little bit, because again, this is a movie of emotion, and a movie of emotion that can't really be expressed verbally. So with that in mind, it plays to its strengths and it works, but still, I think a little bit more dialogue might have helped us all connect with the characters just a little better. But still, A-, lovely film, and boy, again, beautiful to look at. Again, I think the best directed film I've seen this year. So, glad I did that. Again, spontaneous, just kind of a thing I decided to do. So, call me wild, man. Anywho, so this coming weekend, there's a couple films coming out I want to catch. So, we may be spending some time at the movies this weekend. So, I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, they're not all terrible. And yeah, I gotta get home and get ready for work in the morning. So, until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.